Imagine this. A whole generation. They've got smartphones, they've got this incredible determination, and they're rising up across South Asia, demanding change. Today, we're doing a deep dive into these really big shifts, these sort of seismic events where young voices are just echoing through the streets. It feels like a powerful new force.
It really is. And what's striking, I think, is that these aren't, just random incidents popping up here and there. We've seen these incredibly powerful youth movements really reshaping the political landscape in Nepal and Bangladesh and Sri Lanka, too. It feels like part of a bigger story, doesn't it? An interconnected picture.
Absolutely. So our mission for this deep dive is to really unpack the causes, try to understand the human stories behind it, all these revolts, and really get a handle on what they mean for stability. I mean, it's a region with, what, over 1.9 billion people?
Exactly. Huge implications. We need to look at how these waves of change could, well, either tear down old systems or maybe, just maybe, lift these nations somewhere better.
It's like, you mentioned earlier, a pot simmering on the stove. All these frustrations building up, unemployment, inequality, government's just not listening.
Precisely. And then something triggers it, it boils over, and the splash, well, it reaches everyone, especially neighbors like India. You've got those shared borders, deep economic links. It all gets very connected very fast. And we saw this boiling point reached most recently, didn't we, in Nepal, just last year, September 2025.
Right, Nepal. Let's zero in on that. Picture it nestled between these, towering mountains, ancient temples, but also modern dreams. This is where things really ignited. What was the economic backdrop there?
Well, look, Nepal has this heavy, heavy reliance on remittances. We're talking about the money sent home by millions of Nepalese working abroad, often in really tough jobs. In 2024, that cash accounted for a staggering 33.1% of the entire country's GDP, almost a third.
Wow, 33.1%. That's huge. That really paints a picture, doesn't it? It points to this vulnerability, this painful truth that opportunities at home must be pretty scarce.
Incredibly scarce. And the numbers back that up. If you look at youth unemployment, specifically 15 to 24-year-olds, it's sitting at 20.8%.
1 in 5.
1 in 5 young people cannot find work. It's exactly like you said before, invited to a feast, but the table's bare. That kind of situation, that frustration, it's just primed. Ready to go.
And go it did. The spark, the immediate trigger was kind of amazing, wasn't it? A government ban on 26 social media platforms, September 4th, 2025. They cited misinformation.
Right, misinformation. But look, over 40% of Nepal's population is under 25.
Yeah.
For them, apps like TikTok, X, Twitter as it was, they're not just fun, they're lifelines.
For organizing, getting the word out.
Exactly. Sharing ideas, exposing things that are wrong. So this ban, it felt less like tackling misinformation and more like, well, a gag, a direct attempt to silence them.
And did it work? Did it silence them?
Not a chance. This is where you see the ingenuity. These young Nepalese people started calling them the Gen Z revolutionaries. They just whipped out VPNs, bypassed the ban, and poured onto the streets. Kathmandu, other cities. It was massive. And their slogans, things like rise up from every village, rise up from every town, really captured that mood, that determination.
Incredible speed and adaptation. But unfortunately, what started peacefully didn't stay that way. It turned dark, didn't it?
It did, tragically. Reports confirmed at least 19 deaths, hundreds injured in clashes. The scenes coming out of Kathmandu were chaotic. Protesters setting fire to parliament, the prime minister's own residence, homes of other officials. The anger was just raw. Palpable.
And there was that one video, wasn't there? It went viral. Showed the finance minister.
Vishnu Prasad Paudel, yeah. Trying to flee a mob, getting caught, assaulted. It became this really stark symbol of the public rage against what they saw as rampant corruption. And it fed right into this whole Nepo kids narrative that was bubbling up, highlighting the, fancy lifestyles of politicians' children, while the average person's struggling with a GDP per capita of less than $1,500.
That contrast is just fuel on the fire. So what was the outcome? Did the government back down?
Eventually, yes. By September 9th, Prime Minister KP Sharma Oli resigned. He cited an extraordinary situation. The social media ban was lifted, but things haven't exactly settled down. Curfews, military alerts. The unrest is still simmering.
Because it wasn't just about the apps, was it? As you said, deeper motivations.
Absolutely. This was about a system, a feeling that the system funnels all the opportunities to the connected few. But poor education, lack of decent job training, the things that push thousands of young people to migrate every single day, often into really exploitative situations abroad.
You hear stories, right? Graduates driving taxis because there's nothing else. Families split apart.
All the time. And it leads back to that quote from one protester. anonymously, but it really stuck with me. We're not fighting for likes, we're fighting for lives. That sums it up, I think.
Fighting for lives, that's powerful. And, it really echoes what happened just a year before if we shift focus eastward now to Bangladesh in 2024, another storm brewing there. What was the catalyst?
In Bangladesh, it was this long-standing job quota system. It reserved 30%, again, a big chunk of government jobs, for descendants of the 1971 Liberation War veterans.
Okay, so on the surface, maybe it sounds like a way to honor history, perhaps.
Maybe initially, but in practice, certainly under Sheikh Hasina's long tenure, it had become pretty widely seen as a tool for nepotism, a way to keep power and privilege within certain circles.
Right, another example of how these things can get distorted over time. And given Bangladesh's huge young population, what did this mean for the average young person trying to get a decent government job? What were their odds?
The odds were, frankly, terrible. Youth unemployment was already high, 15.7%, but for young women, it was even worse, 23%. And you have something like 2 million young people entering the workforce every single year, competing for maybe 18,000 civil service positions. It's just, the math doesn't work. It felt rigged.
It's an impossible situation. So how did the protests start there? Were they peaceful?
They started peacefully, yes. On university campuses, June 2024, students demanding reforms to this quota system. But then came the crackdown. Police response was incredibly harsh. Dozens were killed initially, and that just escalated everything into a nationwide revolt. The official death tolls are around 300, but the UN and other groups suggest it could be much higher, maybe up to 1,400 killed during that whole period, plus thousands injured, thousands arrested. Shocking figures.
And again, like Nepal, we saw the digital side, didn't we? Gen Z using their phones, social media.
Absolutely. They were using digital tools constantly, not just to mobilize people, getting them out onto the streets, but crucially, to share videos. Videos of police brutality, evidence of corruption, getting around the official media narrative.
And the government's response. Predictable, perhaps?
Pretty predictable. Internet blackouts, curfews, the standard playbook. But it just seemed to fuel the anger rather than quell it. By August 2024, Sheikh Hasina had fled the country, went to India, and an interim government took over.
You mentioned earlier this idea of it being a homegrown push, despite speculation about outside influences. What makes you so sure this was really organic?
Well, look at the stories that emerged. People like Abu Saged, a student who was shot while protesting Eid, became a symbol. His story, and countless others like it, really underscore the human cost and the internal drive. And you saw the sentiment online, on platforms like X, summed up in phrases like, "We didn't start the violence, we ended the silence." It powerfully conveys that this wasn't about outsiders, it was about local people finally reaching a breaking point.
Ending the silence.
Yeah.
And that feeling, that breaking point, it seems like we saw a version of that further south, too, in Sri Lanka back in 2022. A different kind of crisis, but maybe a similar dynamic.
Definitely similar dynamics, but triggered by economics primarily. Sri Lanka in 2022 is facing its absolute worst economic crisis since independence. Foreign reserves just evaporated down to like $20 million.
20 million for a whole country.
Barely anything. It led to crippling shortages of everything: fuel, food, medicine. People were waiting in lines for days. Rolling blackouts were constant. Just widespread despair.
And this economic meltdown was tied pretty closely to one family, wasn't it? The Rajapaksas.
Absolutely. They had this iron grip on power. And the immediate trigger for the mass protests, known as the Aragalaya, their struggle was linked to some disastrous policies, particularly a sudden, ill-conceived ban on chemical fertilizers in 2021. It completely decimated agriculture. Key exports like rice and tea just plummeted. Add that to accusations of massive corruption, and you had this perfect storm brewing. Unemployment soared, inflation went through the roof.
But what was really remarkable about the Aragalaya, from the outside looking in, was how it brought people together, right? Across divides that often seem so entrenched in Sri Lanka.
That was extraordinary. The protests started small, but they grew into these huge occupations of government sites in Colombo, like Gallifey's Green. And they were largely nonviolent. Crucially, they united people from all walks of life: Sinhalese, Tamils, Muslims, Christians, different ethnic groups, different religions, all standing together against the government. It was quite something to see.
And it worked, didn't it? They achieved their main goal.
They did. The pressure was immense. President Gotabaya Rajapaksa eventually fled the country. By 2024, Sri Lanka held elections, and a new government, led by the National People's Power, the NPP, came in promising major reforms.
So it's a powerful example of how economic hardship can unite people. But the story doesn't just end there, does it? Recovery is fragile.
Extremely fragile. The scars are still there. We still hear reports of, heavy-handed police tactics, arbitrary arrests sometimes. It highlights that the path to real, lasting change is long and difficult. The economy is slowly recovering, but rebuilding trust, both domestically and internationally, takes time.
Okay, so we've looked at Nepal, Bangladesh, Sri Lanka. Three distinct
Mhm.
situations, but with these powerful youth movements at their core. When you step back and connect the dots, what's the big picture here? What patterns are jumping out?
Well, the shared grievances are pretty clear, aren't they? Across all three, you see young people just deeply frustrated by the same things. Sky-high unemployment, blatant inequality, governments that seem completely unresponsive, and corruption that feels pervasive.
Okay, but generations have faced those issues before. What makes these movements different? Is it just the scale or is there something else?
I think the digital aspect is the real game changer. It's not just a factor, it's perhaps the defining factor. Social media, encrypted messaging apps, smartphones in everyone's pockets. It allows for organizing at lightning speed, sharing information, and crucially, evidence of wrongdoing in ways that bypass state control completely. It's like a new playbook for dissent. Old methods of control just don't work as well against it.
This digital playbook, it does make you think back, doesn't it, to the Arab Spring around 2010, 2011. Similar factors were at play there too, right? Youth unemployment, authoritarian regimes, social media fanning the flames.
Definitely parallels. High youth unemployment, sometimes 25–50% in those Arab Spring countries. Long-serving, often corrupt leaders. Social media amplifying everything, absolutely. But maybe there are differences too. The outcomes of the Arab Spring were very mixed, leading to prolonged instability or even worse conflict in some places. Perhaps, and this is just speculation, the movements in South Asia seem a bit more focused on specific, maybe more achievable reforms, tackling corruption, job quotas, economic mismanagement, rather than necessarily wholesale revolution everywhere, maybe lessons learned.
Interesting thought. And it's not confined to South Asia either, is it? This global wave of youth activism, often digitally powered.
Not at all. Look at Hong Kong, their creative protest tactics, the way they networked with activists in Thailand and Myanmar through things like the Milk Tea Alliance. Then you had Thailand's own mass rallies in 2020-21 challenging the establishment. And Myanmar, of course, the incredible bravery of young people leading the resistance against the coup for 2021. It's a global phenomenon. Young people are not waiting for permission anymore. They're making their own.
Which brings us to India. Because for India, all this turmoil right on its doorstep. It can't just be distant news, can it? It must be setting off some alarm bells.
Oh, major alarm bells. Strategically, it's huge. Take Nepal. That border is over 1,700 kilometers long, and it's largely open. You've got maybe 3.5 million Nepalese living and working in India. Unrest there immediately disrupts trade. India is Nepal's biggest trading partner, supplied like 65% of its imports. Shortages can happen fast. And
Okay.
that open border, it's a potential route for smuggling, maybe even security threats.
And the Gorkha connection, too.
Right, 32,000 Nepali Gurkhas serve in the Indian Army. Deep ties. But instability can easily breed anti-India sentiment, especially, with China actively increasing its influence and funding big infrastructure projects in Nepal. India has to watch that very closely.
And the ripples go beyond Nepal, obviously.
Absolutely. Bangladesh, the instability after Hasina left, that directly impacts India's nearly $10 billion in annual trade, cooperation on shared rivers, security issues. Sri Lanka's economic crisis strained regional supply chains, impacting ports India relies on. It's all interconnected.
And underneath it all is that youth unemployment figure again. You said the South Asian average is around 15.7%. What's India's figure?
India's own youth unemployment rate is worryingly high, too, around 16%. It's basically right there with the regional average. And that, for a country with such a massive young population, is a potential ticking clock.
A ticking clock that could lead to what? More migration pressure, radicalization, other powers trying to gain influence.
All of the above are risks. If those economic frustrations aren't addressed, you can see surges in migration, young people becoming vulnerable to extremist ideologies or external powers exploiting the situation.
So what's the takeaway for India? What lessons should it be drawing from what's happening next door?
Well, India's official response, like Prime Minister Modi expressing condolences to Nepal and emphasizing dialogue, is part of it. They also have proactive things like scholarships, cultural exchanges to build goodwill. But the big lesson, surely, has to be internal. It's about proactively investing in creating good jobs, improving education and skills training, and really tackling corruption head-on. India has democratic buffers its neighbors might lack, but ignoring the aspirations and frustrations of its own massive youth population. that risks eventually seeing echoes of the same turmoil.
It really feels like a profound wake-up call, doesn't it? Looking across the region, these uprisings, they show that young people aren't just the future anymore. They are a powerful force in the present.
They absolutely are. They're demanding dignity, demanding opportunity. From the streets of Dhaka to the mountains of Nepal, they're literally rewriting the script, forcing accountability.
So, for South Asia, and maybe for the world, stability seems to hinge on actually listening, doesn't it? On figuring out how to channel that energy, that demand for change, into genuine reform.
Exactly. It's not really a question of if more ways of change will come. They almost certainly will. The real question is how we, governments, societies, all of us, choose to ride those waves.
Yeah.
Can we navigate them towards, a genuinely better shore? Or will we just crash against the rocks again?